This is an R Media podcast. Marie Claire presents You're Gonna Want to Hear This.
She had gone away for the weekend, came home, found a condom in the bathroom. Your marriage is breaking down right now, but this could be a breakthrough. We have an opportunity now to cut all the nonsense, all the lying, the deception, and for the two of you to talk honestly and have a deeper and more loving relationship.
Okay, it's story time. I remember walking out of a couples counselling session, sitting in my car and thinking, how did we get here? I ticked all the boxes you're meant to tick, the talks, the exercises, the date nights, and it still felt like I'd somehow lost myself along the way. I'm Georgie McCourt, and this is You're Gonna Want to Hear This, the Marie Claire podcast where fun, frankness, and the conversations we didn't know we needed are always in style. By the time I sat down with psychoanalyst Stephen Grosz, I thought I'd learned a fair bit about love. I'd done long-term relationships, hard conversations, even a bit of therapy homework. And yet, within minutes of talking to Stephen, I realised there was a lot that I hadn't really understood. For more than 40 years, he's listened to thousands of people talk about desire, betrayal, resentment, affairs, heartbreak, and the messy human work of trying to love someone without losing yourself in the process. His new book, Love's Labour, asks a very confronting question, and that is, what if love isn't something we simply fall into? What if it's something we work at? Today, Stephen and I talk about the resentment that quietly kills marriages. I know you know what I'm talking about. Why contempt is more dangerous than anger, and why some couples do actually come back stronger after betrayal. And why sometimes we don't leave a relationship because we've stopped loving the other person, but because we've stopped liking who we are inside it. There were more than a few moments that hit so close to home for me, and I think they might for you too. Here's Stephen Grosz. Thank you so much for being on the Marie Claire podcast. And
I'm really
very
pleased.
excited.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very pleased.
Stephen, your book is called Love's Labour, and that to me immediately suggests that love isn't something that we simply fall into, but it's something that we actively work at. So tell me what the work of love actually looks like in real day-to-day life.
Such a good question. I don't know, when you were growing up, I certainly thought always of love as a feeling. I didn't think of it as work or that it involved a kind of labor. But the longer I do what I do, which is a psychoanalyst, I've done this now 40 years, the more I'm aware of that it does require work. In the beginning of my book, I quote Iris Murdoch, and I love what she says. She says, love is a perception of individuals. Love is the extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real. And then she says, love is the discovery of reality. And I that's sort of both at the heart of what I think love's about, but also therapy, psychoanalysis, seeing people. I sort of think that's the great task of love and of life, is to try and see ourselves clearly, to be honest about that, and to be honest about our partner. Your question is about what does that look like every day? And that means it's the hard thing of, like, sometimes in an argument with someone we love, with our partner, stopping and thinking, do they have a point? Maybe they're right, not me. Trying to see things from their point of view. And sometimes it's quite painful to do. But that's what I mean by the work of love.
I am so intrigued. When you sit in a consulting room, do you ever sit with a couple or an individual and just think this relationship will not survive this? Because I always wondered that in my, when I did work, I didn't do obviously work with someone like yourself, but I did therapy.
Yeah.
But do you ever think they won't survive?
I think in the beginning, I'm just generally curious what's going on. I'm curious to see, and I'd sort of a lot of my time is spent not knowing, not quite sure I wouldn't want to close the door so quickly. Um, I think when I start with people, I'm listening to see what's there. I think I would feel that if there was, as I suggested, indifference, if they almost were indifferent to each other. But most of the people who get here are fighting. They're upset. They're in pain. And from a therapist point of view, that's great. It sounds awful.
So, right, let's get to work.
Yeah, well, it means they're motivated to change. When people are unhappy, it means they want to change, and that's excellent. So I have at times felt that, where I've seen people over a period of time, and I felt that the impasse was very difficult. But most of my work is with individuals, and so the couples that I do see is mostly for assessment, and then I send them to a colleague of mine who specializes in couple work.
Do you think that people can change, the individuals that you work with? Do you think that you can change their behavior?
Oh, yes, there's no doubt. And sometimes I trained as a child analyst too with children. Sometimes you see it really quickly, almost in one meeting. Things can happen with children. It's almost like pruning a plant. Sometimes they just wanted to say something. They were carrying something that they needed to talk about, and they couldn't bring it to their parents for some reason, or teacher, or someone else. And they bring it and they express it, and things change quickly. We have huge resistances to change. In my book, my first book, The Examined Life, I quote a patient who began her therapy saying something like, I want to change, but not if it means changing. I mean, she didn't hear herself as she was saying it, but she wanted to change, but she didn't want to. And that's, I think, lots of us. We want to change, but we sort of want to stay the same too. And that, no, I've seen many people change really quite deeply and quite remarkably, yeah.
But that is through putting in the work, right? And being mindful, recognizing behaviors, recognizing how
Yes.
you might react to things.
Yes, and being prepared to look at themselves and take on things about themselves that they really didn't want to take on.
Many women listening will have asked themselves at some point, am I unhappy, or have I simply outgrown this version of myself? And I know, over the last couple of years, we've done so many articles on the grey divorce, or you hear
Yeah.
about women in their 40s or 50s leaving a marriage, and so
Yes.
men do the same. How do we tell the difference between whether or not we are unhappy, or if we have outgrown this version of ourselves?
Gosh, again, it's just really excellent questions. All the questions are about things that you're asking are excellent because they're about things that people are really thinking about and matter. I have people who come in thinking that. They're not quite sure what to do. And that age is quite interesting too. Say people in their 50s where their kids have just left home, they're on their own for the first time in terms of the children have grown, and they're looking at their third act. The first act was them growing up, second act is getting married, having children, and now they're looking at that third act and thinking, what's it going to be like? Is it going to be more of the same? And it's really an individual decision. Sometimes it requires both individual therapy, people will come to me, and then after a while, they'll go to marital therapy to see if they can actually bring what they want and desire into the marriage. And sometimes the husband won't have it, not consciously, but won't really talk about retirement or won't change anything that they're doing. We'll go to marital therapy, but it's clear they're not going to shift. There are then things start becoming clearer. If you're married to someone who can't, in your 40s, 50s, see you, really hear the things that you want, start making changes to accommodate the things that you want, then there is trouble. The crucial signs, though, are the things you mentioned earlier. It's sort of in the word resentment. If there's that tone of contempt or just negativity, that marriage won't survive that. But if the other person, if both people are able to listen and try and put in the work of changing, of hearing their partner, and in that situation, say the wife might need to hear that her husband is frightened, that he's scared of giving up his job, of retiring, of setting a date when he would do it. He doesn't know what he's going to do with his life. He doesn't have his wife's confidence or desire to travel or build things or do things. So she'll have to hear his fear as well, and that may help him to shift.
You talk about contempt in your book, and you talk about it as being one of the most dangerous emotions in a relationship, which, I mean, I think that's absolutely correct. Why is contempt more destructive than anger?
Oh, I mean, anger is actually an ordinary part of everyday life. I always think of, you know, sometimes people come into my room and they're just too nice. They're just, and you realize they really avoid being cross with their husband. They avoid being cross with everyone, being
They're
angry.
people pleasing. They're
Yeah,
people pleasing.
they're people pleasing and conflict avoidant, we say. And to me, conflict or getting angry is a bit, people are frightened of it, partly because we teach our children not to get angry or not to hate. We don't teach them how to get angry or hate. Hate is ordinary. It really is. Winnicott, who was a wonderful British psychoanalyst, said, if you can't hate your parents, who can you hate? I mean, meaning you have to grow up learning how to have rage and then to apologize, repair, fix the relationship. If you learn that as a child, you'll do that in your couple as an adult. But if you're always made to feel it's a terrible thing to do, you'll be, yes, people pleasing and limiting. So, and I think the other thing too that surprises patients of mine is learning that you can first of all see your feeling that you hate. Doesn't mean you have to do anything. Once you know I'm really furious, you then have a range of options. You can do something very minor like, well, nothing. You can decide, I'm not going to say, or you can send a little text message, I'm annoyed about yesterday, or maybe a more fulsome email, or you can lose it and just get cross and shout at the person. But you can decide what you want to do with that feeling. Most people feel if they start to feel angry, they have no control and it's just going to come out. So therapy can help by learning, oh, I feel this. What do I want to do about it? And that's important. Contempt is different. Contempt is part of a whole group of those emotions of envy, jealousy, which again suggest a looking down on the other person. There's that element of, as I said, of superiority and contempt.
And that's where, men and women feel
Yes.
like they're being spoken to in a patronizing way or a condescending way. And I mean, it's the most irritating thing in the world when you feel like someone's being condescending.
Yes. Well, it's part of, I think, the core of misogyny is that contempt men have held historically for women, that it's a big part of, your listeners will be very aware.
It's absolutely misogyny.
It's the arrogance of that and the arrogance of I know best in men. And it's unbearable. And that it doesn't help that it's often linked to inferiority in the man, the feeling of knowing somewhere inside that they don't know best and trying to protect it with these layers of superiority, but very difficult to give up. There is, I always sometimes feel, almost an addictive aspect to it. It's hard to get someone to surrender that. And it's a big thing in my consulting room here when I always sit up when a man says, I was arguing with my wife. She was saying something. And I thought, she's right. Actually, I'm worse than that. She doesn't know the half of it. I'm really terrible. And when someone can look at themselves and see that, it's quite powerful. So,
In your consulting room, because you hear so many stories, you work with
yeah.
so many different individuals and from time to time couples, what are the biggest issues that you see? What would be the biggest things that people come in and say?
I've done this a long time, and I've seen so many different people. We were calculating the other day over 75,000 hours with patients.
Over
That's,
40 years.
yeah.
Wow.
So it's a lot of work.
A lot
And
of work.
it's all sorts of things. I think, and I've worked with children and adolescents. I don't know if there's one thing. I think I can tell you something which I'm particularly struck by, which is really hard. Maybe that it's I can tell you what the hardest problem is, maybe,
Yes.
which is, as we talked about a moment ago, people come because they're in pain. And that's good from my point of view because that gets them going. And I'll work with people and then they'll get better. And then sometimes they go back to doing what they did before. That's very common. There's technical terms for that. It's called a negative therapeutic reaction, all sorts of things where people get better and then they go back to doing what they've done. Or you see people build something beautiful in their life and then sort of blow it up. I had a consultation a couple months ago where a woman had worked very hard, made a lovely relationship, was very loving, and then sort of admitted to pushing the man out of the relationship. Now, she also is able to admit that she felt terrible. She was lonely now. She was upset. But it also felt familiar, the feeling. And sometimes, this is at the very limit of an analyst's skill, I find, working with my students and colleagues, which is sometimes there are a group of people and who are attached to suffering, that their unhappiness is familiar to them and therefore feel safer than stepping into a new life. That is really hard, where you see people work really hard to perhaps get divorced, make a new marriage, build a loving relationship, things are going well, but they start doing some of the things that they used to do, which made them unhappy previously, and they can't stop that. And if you think that they grew up in an unhappy family, that way of thinking is home. It's sort of like their default position. And working with someone to shift them out of that can be very, very difficult. And I think that's the issue that often my students bring to me, colleagues and I discuss, is the difficult work of, and to a certain degree, I think that's there in all of us. It's not just, but there's a kind of very difficult group where that kind of defines them. But I think to a certain degree, sometimes we do get frightened of the unknown, even when it's pleasure and happiness.
Stay with us, because what Stephen says next about affairs, resentment, and why desire doesn't disappear, it just changes. It might just change the way you think about love altogether. We'll be back soon.
What about our inner child? Because what happens to us when we're children, the relationships that we see, our experiences, our early boyfriends.
Yeah.
How much of that do we take into our future relationships?
I think a lot. I think those things are, I mean, even the earliest life. In my book, I say at one point that I talk about sexual development, and sometimes
Mm.
I think that our sexual behavior is kind of a solution to the problems of our childhood, resolving things. So I describe a man whose relationships seemed to be very split, and that was his way of managing anger and hate. He he loved his wife, his family, his children, but he wouldn't put all of his eggs in one basket. If he felt he'd be he never he had to have secret relationships and be doing lots of different things in a sense to avoid the intensity or getting angry with someone who's quite frightened of that. Um, I think, but even early relationships, there's another story towards the end of my book about a man who gets together with a woman, and it's where in the end she commits suicide. And that has a lifelong effect on him, of course. We don't know where love ends. When we get into a relationship with someone, we are full of hope and all sorts of feelings, but we do not know what's going to happen. One of the things I think some things even that we do know will happen, we don't want to know will happen. For example, all relationships end in loss. All of them. We're either going to divorce or love each other, and one of us will die. It's not going to end well. It's not going to end like
It's
happily ever
inevitable.
after. Yes, it's not like a
There's
Disney.
no happily
No,
ever
no,
after.
no. There's no happy ever after.
Unless you're in The Notebook. I feel like that was a pretty happily ever after ending.
Yes, we want we. But if you know that, that can be a happy ever after. If you know and accept the reality of the fragility of love, the finiteness of love, the difficulty of it, it can be pretty happy.
But the preciousness, because knowing that it's
Absolutely.
not unlimited,
No, it's finite.
it's not
That's,
forever.
oh, absolutely. I completely agree. I think what gives love its power, its ability to, upturn our life and throw us into all sorts of feelings is not that, love is stronger than death and love outlasts. It's the very opposite. It's exactly what you said. It's the fragility of love, the the delicateness of it, that the preciousness of it is what makes it so very powerful. Yeah.
If we talk about the labor of love and love's labor, I look at modern society and I have so many friends, myself included, paying off a mortgage. You've got
Yeah.
children who are very expensive. You've got, you know, both people working really, really hard, not appreciating how hard the other is working, and
Yeah.
both feeling underappreciated. And these huge financial stresses
Yes.
that exist within love today.
Yeah.
Do you think modern life has completely transformed love and just added so much pressure? Do you think we've lost love because of modern society?
I think we are under huge pressure, but when I think of, people like my grandparents or great grandparents who were refugees,
Mm.
Terrible things happened in their lives.
Or world wars. I mean, not
Or
that
world
now's a
wars.
great time, but if we,
No, absolutely. And anxiety. Um, I, I think people do, there is great pressure. One of the things love can give, of course, is that feeling of deep friendship, too, if we get it right, of we'll face this together and we will find a solution. And so it can be strengthening, too. I think my grandmother and grandfather were like that. I think they lived very modestly. They considered themselves wealthy, I think, because to my grandfather, wealth was if you had more money coming in than going out, you're wealthy. That was his definition
But
of
that
wealth.
is like,
It is. It
there's
is.
research around, you know,
Yes.
a certain amount of money, and that's something really interesting to me, because I often, you know, will look at couples and think, you know, if they have a lot of money, okay, well, they must be happy, because who could have any problems if you've got lots and lots of money? What's your experience in, like, does money make you love a person more, basically?
No. What happens with that too is, of course, that there are people who have a lot of money, but they spend more than they have coming in. And so they're in a terrible mess. Spending money too is not unrelated to things I've felt in this room. I sometimes feel that people spend more than they have emotionally. They're living beyond their emotional means. They don't have the psychological wherewithal to be rushing around and living as they're living, and they crash as a result. So I don't think that that's, I mean, it's wonderful. I think it's great if both people are working. I think it's even better if both people are working and at jobs they love and are doing the things they want to do. I think the most important thing is that sort of living within your means psychologically.
I think, oh, even if even if there's a lot of money in a relationship,
Yeah.
if they're not getting affection, or they're not
Oh,
getting like
yeah.
that, I guess that's what I mean with, like, there's couples who, you know,
Yeah.
financially they're fine, they're winning at life, but you know, the man or the woman's like, well, you never tell me you love me, or you never
Yeah.
cuddle me, or we never have sex. So
Yes. That is 100% true. And I've certainly seen people in this room who've lived that and, tried to figure out then. And then a whole lot of things happen where having an affair or a relationship to try and build a life. I said to a patient not that long ago that I thought her husband, who was very wealthy, her boyfriend, who adored her, she would never leave for because he was, she had a whole wealthy existence with her husband, and me, listening to all of her problems and understanding that the three of us added up to a pretty good husband. If you
she's
kind of
got
drew
it
a line,
made.
I thought if you kind of draw a line and add it up, the three of us kind of, glued together, we were sort of a pretty good
So
husband.
is that the secret to a long-lasting relationship? Three men make one.
I sort of thought that's sort of what was going on, is that she'd outsourced a couple of the jobs, and I don't judge people,
No.
as you may have noticed.
Well, let's talk about affairs,
Yeah,
because they're often framed as being purely about sex or
yeah,
betrayal, but your work suggests that they can be much more psychologically
yes.
layered. What do you think that people are really searching for when they step outside of their marriage or relationship, step away from their partner?
Well, there's usually, I mean, it's interesting because I think the first thing you'll think about with me too is somebody's not getting something they want in the marriage. They needed something in the marriage they weren't getting. And generally, as you can tell, there's a story in my book about two analysts where one woman analyst goes off with another woman analyst's husband. And some readers have said you should have been harsher on this woman for doing that. And first of all, I think we don't know what's going on, but clearly somebody's not living the life that they want and not having something. I think that's an important part of it. Uh, uh, I don't think sometimes, like the example of the woman with the boyfriend and she's actually piecing this together to stay in the marriage. The affair and the therapy, it all's kind of cobbled together to help her continue. She has children that she loves. She's trying to make something, her life, peaceful and enough of it what she wants to continue in the marriage. And I've seen affairs where there were two couples, both didn't want to leave their partners. and the husband, very long term, over 20-year affairs, which probably kept both marriages going,
Mm.
because the friendship, kindness, periodic sexual relationship, it was enough to support both people staying in their marriages.
Mm.
So I don't look at it and think, oh, this is terrible, or it's not an ethical issue. It's trying to understand in each instance why and what does the person need that they're not having.
Do you think that people can get past affairs? Can there be an affair in a relationship and the couple survives and even
Oh,
thrives?
absolutely. I think it wasn't long ago. Oh, it again depends what the couple does with it.
Mm.
I was thinking of a couple that came in here, and she had gone away for the weekend, came home, found a condom in the bathroom.
Nice. It's always,
Nice.
yeah, lovely.
Yep. And the explosion was like a nuclear bomb. He was in tears, humiliated, embarrassed. She was absolutely furious because, it was in the middle of a family crisis, a health crisis with her mother, all sorts of things. So, huge explosion. But again, as I said before, they were shocked when I quietly said, um, your marriage is breaking down right now, but this could be a breakthrough. We have an opportunity now to cut all the nonsense, all the lying, the deception, all the whatever has been going on, and for the two of you to talk honestly and have a deeper and more loving relationship. Now, we can either go that way, down that road, or you can hold on to your positions of she did this and break up. He was really upset and was able to, he was saying he felt he was a sex addict. He was, he was addicted to drinking. He was, he just said, that's my person. I've always been like this. I have to change. I'm going to lose everything I love if I don't. And I got him into therapy and into then marital therapy, the couple. That was, a while ago, and they say they're closer now than they've ever been. So, it can be the beginning of a breakthrough, or if people that, and you put your finger on it, George, it's so clever. It's just, but the thing you said right at the start, it's that feeling of resentment. If you hold to the contempt or that point of view, we're not going to get anywhere. He broke down and was able to say, I'm awful. I need to change. And she had to say too, maybe I wasn't listening. Maybe I wasn't seeing and properly taking on and turning a blind eye to stuff that was going on that I didn't want to see. So,
I think in all relationships, ultimately, the individual just wants to be celebrated. They just want to be appreciated. And what I hear from my friends and, what I've experienced, and I'm sure my previous partner is, you don't appreciate me. And then, well, you don't appreciate me. And it just
yeah,
kind of goes in this back and forth.
yeah.
Is that ultimately why one of the reasons that so many couples clash, this feeling that you're not being appreciated?
I think so. I do. It's so sad because sometimes people, it's more complex. I think we have a lot of ambivalence. We cannot appreciate our partner, and at other times be very proud of them. And I think, I'll tell you, what I often find leads to divorce, and this may sound strange to you, isn't he doesn't appreciate me. It's the hatred and the anger and the resentment we start feeling, and then we think, God, I don't want to be this person. It's more our upset with ourselves that pushes us to leave than our upset with the other person. Most of the patients and people who've been in this room who've gone for divorce went for divorce ultimately because they hated the person they had become in that marriage. Not, they didn't hate the other person as much as they hated who they now were. And they just said, I don't want to be this person. I don't want to live the rest of my life being this person.
That's so interesting, and it's so true.
It's heartbreaking too, because I think these things are so painful. I think I can help people. I think my colleagues can help people, but there has to be so much, desire to work at it, love's labor in both people. And that means letting go of a lot of the stuff we think and trying to see the other person's point of view, really feel it.
When I was doing marriage counselling, which I did find so effective the first time, but there was this exercise that we had to do where it was like 4 questions, and every night it was, what do you appreciate about the person? Tell me about how you made me feel loved, and 3 things you love about your partner, something like that.
Yes.
And it sounds small, but the impact was so big, just sitting there opposite each other. It didn't take very long, but just saying, and it was, I appreciate that you put the kids to bed and you made me a cup of tea. It's just, it doesn't have to be big things. No. And that was work, because you're tired at the end of the night. You might want to read a book or watch TV, but it does actually work.
It does work. It works, by the way, even if you don't say it out loud. What's really surprising sometimes is just to pause at the end of the day and think about those things. And your disposition towards your partner will change. Your feelings about, what do I appreciate? You'll hear yourself, thank you for making dinner. Thank you for helping with the kids. Thank you for this. Thank you for that. You'll hear, but you don't even have to say a lot of that. One thing such as saying about that patient of mine who in the middle of the argument agreed with his wife is when that happens, sometimes just internally, the temperature in us drops and our partner feels it and they relax too, because they can feel you've kind of downed weapons and just are available.
It's so, that's what I found through marriage counselling. We were so much softer with each other. We were kinder. Yes. And even though obviously it didn't work, it was still so interesting in terms of relationships and understanding that your partner isn't trying to annoy the shit out of you because he did something. He or she. Yeah. Everyone is hopefully trying and has good intentions.
Yeah. But sometimes, when people don't go to marriage therapy, why do you think that is? Sometimes one partner will propose. I'm always fascinated why not go?
It was hard to get my former partner there, and I know a lot of men are resistant. For me, I thought, of course, why not go? It's like, it's so important. Like, this is marriage or a relationship. You go to the gym, you go and do other things. Yes. I think everyone should go to therapy. It is so beneficial. Yeah. And the stakes are high. And you've got to know, if your relationship does end, I wanted to know that I'd done everything I could.
You tried everything. Yeah. Because of the children. Like, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, having the long game in mind. That, you have 2 daughters. There's at one point I say in my book too, with those 2 analysts, the women who are the one who goes off with the other's husband, we were all colleagues. And at one point I say, one of them says to me, what are you looking for in a wife? I was unmarried when I was friends with them. And I say, I'm looking for a woman who'll be good in a divorce. And they think this is very funny. And I said, I'm not joking. I'm looking for someone who, when everything is terrible, will be good, who will be kind and fair. And I still believe that when I meet people who are looking for partners, I think, how's this person going to be in the divorce? Is he going to be generous and fair and kind, or is he going to be awful? And that'll give you a clue about whether you should get together or not.
It's a good question for a first date. Tell me what
Yes.
you'd be like in a divorce. Stephen, my last question is, the name of this podcast is You're Going to Want to Hear This. And
Yeah.
it's all about the messages we want our listeners to hear.
Yeah.
There's so much in your book. What is one message that you want women to hear, I guess, in the context of love?
I sometimes think we don't see that happiness is just quite simple. It is there in little moments. It is that sweetness, the pleasure, the deep pleasure of desiring exactly what you have, and how wonderful that is, and to be aware and to look for that each day.
Stephen, thank you so much.
Well,
Very hard to come up with only a handful of questions for you, because
They
I
were
could ask
amazing.
you 100.
No, they were excellent questions, really thought-provoking.
Your work is
really
so
good.
fascinating and interesting. And I think
Thank
we're
you
all
so much.
fascinated by love and relationships and people. And
Yeah.
so thank you.
But thank you.
So I need to tell you, after we stopped recording this chat, Stephen said something to me that has quietly rearranged the furniture in my brain. He said this: the sweetness of desiring what you already have, that's happiness. I've found myself coming back to that line on school runs, in supermarket queues, in those small moments when it's tempting to mentally sprint ahead to the next thing. It's helped me shift from constantly editing my life in my head to actually noticing the parts that already feel good. Because the world is very good at telling us to upgrade everything: our homes, our bodies, our relationships, even our personalities. But maybe love isn't always in the big cinematic gestures. Maybe it's just the coffee on the balcony in the morning, someone reaching for your hand without thinking, choosing kindness over the perfectly justified eye roll. Stephen's new book, Love's Labour, has given me the language for some of those tiny but important shifts. If this conversation nudged something in you or gave you a different way of looking at your own relationships, we'd love it if you followed the show, left a rating, or shared this episode with someone who might need it. That's exactly what we're trying to do on You're Going to Want to Hear This. Pass on the ideas and stories that actually make real life feel a little bit more understandable, gentle, and more yours. Thank you for listening and for being part of that with us. I'll see you next week.